Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, and come with me. See, the winter is past, the rains are over and gone. Flowers appear on the earth, the season of singing is come. The cooing of doves is heard in our land. The fig tree forms its early fruit. The blossoming vines spread their fragrance. Arise, come, my darling, my beautiful one, come with me. Song of Solomon 2:10-13. She heard her name. It sounded like a jewel in a box, cradled in gossamer paper. It was the way he had always said it. Her breath caught. Reluctantly, she looked up. Already, she had betrayed herself. How are you? 20 years. Somehow, she knew she would meet him here, at a place like this, amongst the tuxedo throng. It was an image that remained indelible in her mind, although she had never imagined how she would end up here, in this place, where talk of deficits and taxes intermingled with robust handshakes and laughter that was not laughter. She was no longer the same person. She was glad. In an indigo gown, hair left youthfully flowing down her back, she felt elegant, grounded. Childbearing, careering, and marital travailing had matured her into the woman she should have been, could not have been, when she had last seen him. Her eyes scanned the room. Where was her husband? Never near when she needed him. Not through the postpartum depression, not through her father's illness, not through the disappointment of the 100th rejection or the joy of her first published story. They led harmonious, parallel lives just within arm's reach, without snags or perilous intersections. She was alone again, all alone in a room of over 300 people, alone with the one who might have been. He was still tall, of course, same erudite glasses on a prominent bridge, a black tuxedo, like the night of his sister's wedding at a castle. They danced the jive together, their energy on the dance floor drawing stares. She wore a shimmering gown with a long slit up her thigh, affording her ample room to move with the lively music. He was the man who lifted her off her feet with an ease and authority that she only ever knew in the stories she read and wrote. Afterwards, they drove to his father's place, where he undressed her, and they made love in the room beside the old man who had long dozed off in bourbon dreams. In the morning, he found her again, still groggy with sleep, while his father filled the kettle in the kitchen for tea, then opened the door to let the dog out. They knew he would not disturb them, a man used to minding his own business, even under his own roof. They would linger under the warm sheets, quiet for a long time. It was an unspoken understanding they shared, a hiding away from the world that might awaken them to the reality that theirs was not a union meant to last, one too consuming to permit. Many were those days when they would run to engagements late, company parties, family gatherings, weddings, faces flushed from having just devoured another human being. Their conversations with people were distracted, punctuated by glances from across the room that hurled each of them back into a secret place, their secret. He was always better at it than she was, the jarring re-entering into society. She used to watch him, speaking easily of presidents and prime ministers, economic policy and foreign affairs, earnings and profit margins, national debt and GDPs, while she, still reeling from his proximity, could not bring herself back to the moment at hand. Not while he was so close. touchable. She couldn't decide whether they were the same or different, close together or worlds apart, only that they were drawn to each other, drawn by the faraway flicker in the other's eyes that promised something miraculous, something that could not be had in the day-to-day, lost in the mundane. The question hung in the air, above the glint of glasses held in talking hands. How are you? Did he mean how she was at that moment, or how she was when they had last spoken? 20+ years, boiled down, left simmering, reduced to a thick, concentrated moment. How are you? The hurt, the bewilderment, the waiting, the anger, the final letting go. I'm fine. How are you? Saying his name would be inappropriate. I'm well, thank you. His manicured hands, still so familiar, clutched the chair beside her, the place where her husband had sat, would sit again. A pang of guilt. What are you doing here? She wondered the same. That he asked it with intimate knowledge shot her back 20 years. His aftershave, spicy, engulfed her. I'm a member. You? Of course he was. I am as well. He spoke oddly, self-conscious. After all these years, he was the one who was self-conscious. She glanced around, wondered if there was a woman nearby to claim him. She saw none. She was not surprised for some reason, though she resisted being smug. She thought she would hope that whoever it might be, she would be nondescript, unspectacular. But she engaged in none of that. Beneath her, she could make small talk, pretend that he was an old friend. She was good at that. Genuine, spontaneous warmth. Only they had never really been friends. They occupied different worlds. Confidants, maybe. Lovers. This just occurred to her. A revelation. What do you say to an old lover? You live here in town? Yes, downtown. She nodded. Nothing had changed. He had always wanted to be in the thick of things. You? No, I mean not downtown, uptown, north of here. She left out in the suburbs. I'm writing. Why did she have to say that? Oh? She nodded again, embarrassed. She had published one piece after years of trying. Really? That's great. The way he said it. Gossamer paper. The last time she had heard it was over the phone. After a year of separation, he had called again. A renewed hope had entered her heart. How are you? Smile to receiver. A smile that filled her. I'm great. How are you? I've missed you. Me too. They had never needed to say much. They had history. Him, 3 jobs, death of a sister, an affair. Her, graduate school, a stint abroad, hating him, forgiving him. Even now, decades dissolved into air, like a hypnotist snapping his fingers. The surprise meeting this night had the same effect on her. Just knowing that he was out there, somewhere in the world, ignited in her excitement and anxiety all at once. Now, here he was, in the flesh. She breathed deeply, looking up at him from where she sat at the pristine table, clad in white linen and sparkling dinnerware. As their eyes lingered on the other, uncertain, she felt a hand on her arm. Are you all right? Her husband. What was he doing here, so available? A question in his eyes. Why? Did he know? How would he know? Then she felt it, the pressure between her eyes. He somehow always recognized it, when she was lost in thought, piecing the world together into words. But she couldn't at that moment, couldn't articulate. She sat there between two men, each standing beside her, like pillars. She wondered if she should introduce them. But why should she? Who was he to her anymore, the one on her left, that she should introduce him to the man she had given her life to? And who was he on the right, that she should introduce him to the one who had been her only taste of life as it should be? Hi. She watched the two men lock eyes. Nice to meet you. I'm a friend of your wife, her husband said, finishing his sentence. She thought she'd never heard him say that before. Wife. But he must have, at some point. The word sounded foreign on his lips, a word he'd just discovered. She looked from one man to the other, wondering to whom she owed an acknowledgement. Of what she was not sure. All she knew was that she suddenly felt utterly alone, in no man's land, where she could neither venture forward nor back, bereft of an ally on either side. We went to school together many years ago. A lie for her benefit. But she didn't want him to lie. Hated to lie. There was nothing to hide. It happened so long ago, before marriage, before everything. Oh, really? He looked down at her, his hand still resting on her shoulder. Odd. He never did that. She did not look up, only felt his hand heavy on her. It was the same hand that took hers by surprise as they walked beneath the forest in the cold, fall air nearly 20 years earlier. She recalled how those fingers, long and square, had suddenly interlaced themselves with hers. Spontaneous, bold. It had been 2 years since she'd known the touch of a man. She was taken off guard, barely time to think. Then came the midweek phone calls, a picnic on a deserted winter beach, a hasty proposal. What's this? Open it. An envelope with the card inside, along with the ring made of aluminum foil. She read, "This ring is a placeholder for the real one." Behind a flap in the card, "I love you. Will you marry me?" It was a short engagement, still too long. They necked like fools in her parents' basement after Thanksgiving dinner, while Steel Magnolias played on the VCR. Went on weekend trips to their alma mater towns, where they rolled around on motel beds, fully dressed, and laughed about histories they had not shared, making up for lost time. After the wedding, things changed quickly. I've been laid off. That's okay. I love you. I love you too. We'll work it out. And they always did. Then the miscarriage. There were no words. Holding each other, they bawled in the car. A year later, she was pregnant again. Do you hear it? Smile. Beating like a jackhammer. I love you. I love you too. Things got harried when their son, was born. More layoffs. Life had come upon them. She went back to work at the firm to help with the bills. But she'd always wanted to write, only never had time. Never the right time. I just need to get out a few more resumes. Something will come up. He tried to hide the empty bottles, lost his temper, started breaking things. Meanwhile, she docketed billable hours, made shopping lists, drove kids to daycare, and initiated lovemaking. I love you. I love you too. Thanks for your patience. Eventually, something did come up. He was now a man respected by the world. She was his wife and a writer. His hand seemed welded to her bare skin. She was always an excellent student, said the other, gentle squeezing on her shoulder. There was nothing she couldn't do. Release. The intimacy in his voice made her avert her eyes, as if he had stripped her naked. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you tonight's guest of honor. There's still nothing she can't do, said her husband quietly. No squeezing now, just a hand, flaccid. Shouts of support, enthusiastic applause, chanting the name of the honored person, her husband. I'll be right back. Then he was gone, hand-pumping, man-hugging, air-kissing. She was alone again. She should say something, she thought, but she was tired of the effort. He did it for her. You've done well for yourself. She knew what he meant, made her want to scream, but if she started, she wouldn't stop. It's really an honor to be standing here tonight. First of all, I want to thank all of you, my supporters. You haven't changed, he added quietly. It was true. Good genes. People often mistook her for her daughter's older sister. But he had changed. Gray had begun to line his temples, and the once broad shoulders had shrunk somewhat. She remembered how those shoulders had once overwhelmed her. Of course I have. Everyone changes. He continued to stand there, clutching the chair. There's so many people to thank, without whom I wouldn't be standing here before you today. She sensed him fidgeting, deciding what to do. Would he sit? Not likely, not in her husband's chair. The air filled with their silence. There was nothing else to say that they both did not know already. He was not married, nor had he ever been. He had no children, he had a career, but it had not turned out to be the elixir he'd always relentlessly sought. He traveled, lusted, chased, but always returned to the same place, where she was, where they were again. Of these things, she was certain. His proximity now, his inability to say more or to leave her side, told her everything. But especially my wife, my partner, and my best friend. Her name, shouts of encouragement. She looked around, confused. She has been my rock and my champion. From where he stood on the stage, her husband was as handsome as he'd always been to her. But there seemed to be two of him. For a moment she thought she saw the one with the easy smile and stubborn cowlick that descended frequently into shy eyes, the one who whistled badly whenever he was nervous, like on their early dates, whose fingers snaked their way through hers when they took long walks together, her favorite pastime. That one faded in and out like a summoned apparition, sporadically superimposing over the other, the more concrete. She blinked to make sure she wasn't seeing double, a consequence of champagne doing its work. His eyes lasered on her. The room emptied before them. There was nothing to say that they both did not already know. I'm sorry. I know. I'll make it right. I know. I love you. I love you too. A smile, uncertain, as if seeing her for the first time. In the distance between them, a long stretch of a deserted road rolled out. It dipped and turned, unspectacular in every way, neither a beginning nor an end, only there, winding into the distance. She strained, tiptoed, to see beyond the horizon. Without looking, she knew that the one standing beside her, the one who'd never left her, had gone.